So let's talk a little bit about VCs and how they differ. So VC stands for venture capital, right? So venture capital essentially is a version of speculation where investors or people collect funds from a group of different investors. They put them together in a pool, and then they invest in companies and hope to return, 4x or 10x or 100x what they, invested for those particular investors. Now, traditional VC, one of the big goals is basically to either invest early seed or late stage. So early seed is usually before a company has revenue or just when it's starting to have revenue, starting to identify that it has product market fit. And so then you put in a smaller amount of money to get a larger percentage of the company. And the hopes is that over time, it increases 100 times, right? So, a check size for, an early stage company is most likely going to be $1 million or less, right? Another example for like late stage on the flip side is that you have a company that is probably already approaching unicorn status. So unicorn status means that it's worth about $1 billion. The way that they calculate worth is not necessarily based on how much revenue or how many customers. It's really still about potential, right? So they're saying the potential for this company, we believe, is already approaching that $1 billion number, right? And so at that point, the check sizes can be very large, right? So these are, potentially millions or tens of millions of dollars that a VC is investing in that company with the hope that it still has enough growth and has a very clear exit strategy that's going to return them still a pretty large multiple on these particular investments. So for instance, that's like when you start thinking about people like Sequoia, for instance, right? Like they might do a later investment. There's a lot of different ways that people might actually shake and bake this to kind of make it make sense and make it work out long term. And so essentially what happens there is if they're early seed, they're going to exert a lot of control over the company, right? So they might want to, have multiple board seats. They want to have the ability to kind of say your strategy is wrong, or you should pivot, or these are who you should hire or fire. And so it becomes a very controlling type of mechanism. And then on the flip side, on the late stage, you're in a situation where there's very little control that you can exert. Like if the company's already worth almost $1 billion, it's probably working out pretty effectively. And all you're really doing is helping them get to the point that they can have that exit. So there's a little bit less control. So then how do I think about this from Divergent Ventures? So first and foremost, the venture firm is focused on early stage investment at this time. And so I approach it a little bit different though, because I'm not simply saying, let me come in here, get board seats and control what you're doing. It's different for me. My background is in coaching and helping people be successful, right? And so what it means when you actually coach people is that I don't dictate to them what they should or should not do. Instead, what I do is I go through and ask really good questions. I challenge in really specific ways to help them come to better conclusions, right? And that's the whole goal of a coach. A coach is not to control you. It's about giving you the skills necessary so that you can accomplish what you're set out to accomplish. So if a founder comes to me and says, hey B, I'm trying to fundraise $5 million and I am struggling because I'm not sure how to position my company, or I feel like I'm not doing a great job connecting with my investors, or I feel like, maybe, people aren't really connecting to the mission. My response to that is, okay, so why do you think that's happening, right? And so the person might come to me and say, well, it's because I'm feeling less confident. Well, why are you not feeling that confident in what you can do? And so it's a different approach. And that's kind of the Divergent Ventures way. I say, I'm a Southerner, my dad's a minister, my mom was a guidance counselor, so we have this really specific opinion about how you can wrap people around, wrap your arms around people, resource them very effectively, and help them become more successful. And that's kind of my philosophy. So my philosophy is, I'm going to coach you. I'm going to understand what your opportunities are. I'm going to challenge you to work on different strategies to turn those opportunities into your strengths, right? I'm going to work with you to also identify your weaknesses, and we're going to turn those into your strengths. Your threats, what the heck are threats, right? You should be thinking dynamically about what your customers need, what type of value you need to deliver to your customers. You shouldn't be worried about who else is in the industry and whether they're going to build the exact same thing as you. That's a terrible strategy. Customer first, customer always, right? How can you delight people? Because product market fit starts when people specifically start using your products in a destructive way. A great example is old school Twitter, right? Like, I mean, the first thing that you started seeing when people talked about the new Twitter ownership and the fact that they were laying off all those people is it's going to go back to old school Twitter. And so what does that mean? It means that back in the day, there would be so many people using Twitter that Twitter would literally fail. Like, you could not load it. It would not work. It was exceptionally frustrating, but you waited because it was such an important part of your day, important part of what you did every day. So they had explosive product market fit. Right? And so product market fit is the only thing that really I should be caring about from a VC perspective. Does this organization have product market fit? Because if they do, that's the first hurdle that you have to tackle to even contemplate getting to profitability, right? And so that is kind of what I focus on, is reworking, re-engineering, and supporting founders to get all the blockers that are going to prevent them from getting their product market fit out of the way. And then from there, once we understand what is the blocker and how we are going to actually get the product market fit, or that we've accomplished product market fit, I then take a step back and look at my advisors and think, who amongst the people do I know can help take that person to another level, potential industry, or the particular segment that they're working on, right? So if it's a B2B healthcare company, I'm gonna reach out to my healthcare team. Hey, I have a healthcare person over here. There's some interesting dynamic things going on. Could you help them think through how they can start to future-proof their company by building exactly what their customers are looking for right now, so that by the time the customers even know that they're looking for it, the product's already built, right? It's about being 2, 5, 10, 20 steps ahead of what your competition is doing, and that's what my advisors do. So these are experts in so many different areas and so many different verticals, and also these are literally the people who teach the people who go out and become the #1 executives in this country. And so that's what's really, really exciting about how Divergent Ventures is tackling this particular problem. The other thing that's kind of different about Divergent Ventures is that I always assumed that I was never going to be the one check that was going to make the difference for every single person, right? I think my coaching is going to be dynamic. It's going to be a differentiator. But I know that, like, from a monetary perspective, I don't have an unlimited fund. So I thought, can I work with these different founders to ensure they have everything from a financial perspective that they need? And so one of the first things I started doing is thinking about this as a traditional two-sided marketplace, right? So over here you have buyers, which are the investors who are looking for that great deal. And then over here you have founders, which are the supply, who are trying to, essentially, sell their wares to these other buyers over here. And so I thought about it and said, well, the thing about this, though, from a supply perspective, is that they're going to be more and more attractive if they continue to ensure that their rounds are completely fulfilled, or even potentially oversubscribed. So oversubscribed means that not only did they accomplish the amount of money that they wanted to raise, they were actually able to accomplish more than that. So let's say a person was raising $5 million and they actually were able to raise $6 million. That means they're oversubscribed, which is a great place to be in because it shows that there's demand, and it also means that there's more interest. So for instance, you might have other investors or other operators or people who actually do the work be interested in your company simply because of the demand of the number of investors who want to invest in your company. And so what I started doing is reaching out to all the other VCs, all the other smaller VCs in the area that had similar interests that I did. So for instance, there's Corridor VC in the South. There is M25 in the Midwest. I'm working on a relationship with the Great North Capital in Minneapolis, right? I also started to seek out relationships with accelerators. So I'm working with Generator, right, which is one of the largest accelerator networks in the country that operates outside of traditional tech ecosystem. So looking for the people who are already doing work in those communities, and instead of saying I'm coming in to take up space, it's I'm coming in and I would like to partner with you because I have a feeling that you're working with great founders. I have a feeling that you're working with great investors, and we're all looking for the same exact dynamic opportunity, which is to create outsized returns. And so instead of us trying to use our resources separately and then hoping that we can get a big investor, one of those top 25% investors to also get interested in the areas, the regions that we invest in. Instead, let's just combine our efforts and we can do it ourselves, right? I am a very proud Mississippian. I'm a very proud Tennessean. I'm a very proud, transplant Chicagoan, right? And what I found is these areas are exceptionally resilient. They have been spending years, decades, a century working amongst themselves, trying to create the types of change that will engender really great economic impacts to the communities. But the simple fact is that, there hasn't been a great deal of interest from the folks on the West Coast or from the folks on the East Coast at the scale that it is in California or New York or Massachusetts or Texas. And so less than 15% of all venture investments go to basically the whole rest of this country, right? And think about that. There's hundreds of millions of people in this country, and the region that represents the largest percentage of citizens of this country literally have less than 15% of all venture capital investment. That is completely unacceptable. And so for me, I thought, I'm not going to be able to change, these large venture capital and private equity folks' mind instantly. I can't do that. So instead, let me go out and find every single person who is on a similar path, a similar mission, who's already in those areas, who's already as excited about investing in those areas as I am, and let's create a huge network of us, right? And we can create network effects, right? And so what that becomes a dramatically different experience, because not a single one of us is responsible for creating this change. We can be dozens of us or hundreds of us who are working together dynamically to target great talent, to pour into them our resources, our finances, to help them grow that next unicorn in the Midwest, in the South, or in the Mountain West. And that is just the Divergent Ventures difference, right? Someone asked me recently, I was in an investment meeting, and they asked me, well, your thesis, there's other people who've done it. Like, why do you think that you can do it better? And it's for that reason. I started off as a kid. My mother was a single parent with 3 kids. And I remember when I was looking at her finances at some point, I was like, wow, you never made more than $25,000 a year the entire time you were alive. And you somehow made it work. And I was just thinking to myself, when you start off with someone who's that savvy, who's that nimble, how could you not have the belief that every other single person who's down in the areas where I'm from, where I've lived, the people that I love, if they just simply had the types of resources that you have in the Californias, the New Yorks, the Massachusetts, and Texas, why would they not be able to create companies as good as Meta, as good as Google, as good as Apple? And I'm going to tell you, as I have started making connections, so I have this really, really big goal for this year. So I don't do New Year's resolutions, I do goals. And so what I did is for this year, I decided to make my challenge to actually reach and connect with 1,000 people in these areas. And by the way, right now as we're recording this, I'm about 27 or so days into this, and I'm already at 95 people, right? And it's because as soon as I started connecting to folks, they were so excited, they started connecting me with more people. And so what does that really mean? I've talked to 95 people, and what I figured out is that the founders in these areas are so different than many of the founders that I've met in Silicon Valley, in New York, all these other places, because they literally live with the problems that they are trying to solve, right? And so what does that mean? It means that they aren't raising money and hoping that they're going to find a problem, like that rocket idea. What they're saying is that I know that I can make something really happen as long as I have the financial backing and some additional resources. And so it's just a dynamic area to be in. It's so amazing to be steeped with so many thoughtful people who want to give back as well in their communities. And I'm really excited. And again, this is the difference between Divergent Ventures, the way that we're going to do venture capital, and the way that so many other venture capitalists do. Okay.